We now say welcome to Fox Sports Ohio and 105.7 The Zones. Dave Maetzold talk a little bit about the Blue Jackets and what's going on in the offseason. And Dave, I want to start with this. Stan and I are split on our reaction to John Tortorella's reaction to the Pittsburgh press conference and what he said following Jack Johnson's comments and Jim Rutherford's comments. I loved it. I love the off the cuff. I love the emotion. Stan thinks it was a little bit overboard, childish. Didn't like the language.
You'd be killing a player if they behaved that way, Matt.
Well, man, that may be true. But Dave being around Torts, and he actually has been a measured John Tortorella for the most part since he's been in Columbus. But what did you think about what he said to Aaron Portzline?
I'm going to have to side with Stan on this one. I think that you've got to think a little bit bigger than your own emotion at that point and think about the organization. And I'm not sure that the eruption equaled the original statements from Jack and from Jim Rutherford. I didn't like either one of those statements, but to respond in that way I thought was a little bit over the top. No, I take that back. It was a lot over the top. I get why you would construe that as a backhanded slap towards the organization. Frankly, I had more problems with Rutherford's comments than I did with Jack Johnson's. I think Jack was just saying, hey, this team's won 2 out of 3 Stanley Cups, man. It's great to be a part of this. But I can understand why Torch did it. I just think he went too far.
Do you think, and this was the analogy that I gave, I do agree that it was an overreaction, and maybe part of my enjoyment of it is just from a media standpoint. You like to have things to talk about, and boy, that was good fodder for us to talk about. But a lot of times, like if the analogy I used is your wife isn't quick enough bringing you the beer or whatever or the dinner, and you blow up at her, and it's really not that; it's 4, 5, 6 other things that have gone on, and with the Panarin announcement and everything going on, and the Blue Jackets trying in Tort's mind to establish legitimacy in the NFL, in the NHL, and then these guys make comments like that. Was that like the last straw for him?
Yeah, and I wonder if a lot of fans weren't feeling that way too. Free agency opened, and all it was loss for the Jackets. With all those guys leaving town, the Panarin situation. That's a pretty good way to look at it, and I'm sure that Torts, whether he was in town or whether he was at his cottage up in Wisconsin or wherever he was probably feeling a lot of that same stuff and having that same kind of reaction. Nonetheless, I just think he might have wanted to just tone it down just a little bit. I get all of it, but just tone it back just a little bit because that's coming back. And I'll tell you this. I think the Columbus Blue Jackets are very thankful. They should send a thank you card to one LeBron James for making his announcement on the same day. Otherwise, it would have been a bigger national and, frankly, international story in Canada and the U.S., right?
That's exactly right.
If LeBron is still waiting, and was going to wait until, I think his original statement was today, was going to be his announcement day, and there's nothing going on that Sunday, then Torts goes right to the top of the news feed, right? And everybody's like, oh, my God, did you see what Torts said?
Yeah.
As it was, he took a distinct back seat to LeBron.
Hey, Dave, I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position, but I mean, traveling with the team and being around the team as much as you were, Jack Johnson within the team dynamic, were there any issues? I mean, I never heard of any. Were there any issues with him and his teammates? And I only bring that up because one of Torts' comments in the Aaron Portzline article, if I were one of his teammates, boy, and heard him say this, boy, and I don't know if his teammates would necessarily take it the same way he did, but what was his dynamic with the rest of the locker room?
Well, especially after Jack got married and became a father, I think he became more of a stay-at-home dad kind of guy and more of a guy who wasn't out, I don't want to say running around with the guys because that makes it sound like they're out running around, but he became a mellower guy in terms of the way he was off the ice. And there are always, in those situations, 2 pretty distinct groups of the young guys who are out and carefree and older guys who've got families and stuff like that. And that would be the only distinction that I would have noticed. And other than that, he certainly went through his own financial difficulties, his struggle with his parents and all of that kind of stuff. And he was withdrawn on that point only. It wasn't something that he was certainly sitting around chatting with everybody about. And And I think when that whole thing happened, it certainly had an impact on the team dynamic. But I didn't see any of it in a negative way. I don't think there was any, we're not going out with him, or him saying, I'm not hanging out with those guys. I think it was just a fact of him being 30 and some of those guys being in their early 20s, and then some of the other stuff that was going on in his own personal life. But I don't think there was any other dynamic to be concerned with.
Two guys the Jackets were hoping to stay that went on both to Colorado, Ian Cole, Matt Calvert. They do, however, sign Riley Nash. What do you think of those moves and how things are shaping up right now for Jarmo Kekalainen and the Jackets?
I was a big Ian Cole fan. I was really hoping that Ian Cole would stay, and apparently it was only a difference of about $200,000 when it came down to it. So I hope that's not a guy who slipped away that the Blue Jackets are going to regret that they have let him slip away. By the same token, they've got some young defensemen, and one of them is Gabriel Carlson, who came on 2 years ago and made an impact, and then last year was battling with some injuries. I know he's one of the guys that they're counting on to come in and take up some of that ice time. And then in terms of Riley Nash coming back to Columbus, I think that he fills the void of a Matt Calvert departing, of a Mark Lechestu departing. He's a centerman. He's a third, fourth line centerman who can come in and give you those gritty minutes, those energy minutes, when you need a guy to go in there and make a hit in the corner or go in and dig a puck out and create something. I think he is that kind of guy, and he fills something that has been a problem for this team for the last couple of years in terms of depth, and that's another good quality center who's got some experience behind him. So I think it's kind of a wash there. The only thing I'm fearful they're going to regret is letting Ian Cole walk, because he was so much to this team, leader on the ice and a guy who had that championship pedigree with two Stanley Cup rings. So I just hope that they don't regret letting him go.
Stan and I had the discussion yesterday equating what's going on with Artemi Panarin. This is not a new thought. Other people have pointed it out as well. But what just happened with John Tavares and the Islanders, he goes to Toronto and you get nothing for him. I don't know if anything affects the thought process of Jarmo Kekalainen. He's well aware of this situation. I'm just wondering if that heightens the awareness that I got to figure this out sooner rather than later. I cannot let this linger.
Well, certainly that was right in the face of the Blue Jackets, the way that whole thing played out. Tavares had his short list of teams that he was going to. The Islanders thought they were right in it until the end. And then, bang, he goes to his hometown and goes to Toronto. It's a year away, and they have indicated that there's no panic, there's no rush, but boy, they'd like to get a deal done. If it's before this season, that's great. If it's at the trade deadline, it gets it a little dicier because you're running out of time there as you get closer and closer to the end of the season, but they don't want to be stuck holding the bag the way the Islanders were, and all of a sudden they've got nothing for Artemi Panarin. That would be a double whammy. It's already affected the organization. It's already got guys going, geez, this is a guy we were going to market, and put his face up on the front of Nationwide Arena and all that kind of stuff. And Torts, as you mentioned, Torts has got to be feeling it too. So I know they want to get that thing resolved, and the best scenario is to keep him in Columbus. I don't know what the chances are, but I know that Jarmo's going to give it his best shot.
Let me ask you this too, Dave, before I let you go. Let's say that Panarin is still with the club on opening day because they haven't gotten the trade that they want, or maybe they think, hey, maybe there's a chance. He indicates something that maybe there's a chance you can keep him, but you still don't know. And you're playing really well. The Jackets are having a heck of a year as the trade deadline approaches, but you have that feeling that he's going to leave you, much like the Tavares situation. Do you pull the trigger, or do you go all in and say, if he leaves, he leaves. We've got a team that looks like it's competitive for the playoffs. We're going to ride this out with this guy for this year.
Yeah, the X factor is, does he have that extra gear that he would go to, as we saw him do this last spring? Does he want to go to that extra gear, and will he give it to you? If he knows that he's a lame duck, you would think that his pride and his professionalism would say, absolutely, he's going to that gear, and he's going to carry his current team as far as he can. That's the intangible. How would you ever know? How would you ever know if he's got that mentality to say, I'm out of here, so I'm gonna click it back a gear, or you know what, I'm a professional, I'm going to win with this team. That's the question that the psychologists would try to answer as they weigh the decision, I guess.
All right, Dave. Appreciate it very much. It's going to be an interesting few weeks, interesting rest of the offseason for the Blue Jackets. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right. You guys have a great Fourth. And Stan, take it easy on the elephant ears down at Red, White, and Blue. Only have one, okay?
I don't do elephant ears. I'm more of a funnel cake kind of guy.
Attaboy, attaboy.